Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into the magic of J.K. Rowling's characters.
The ones you just can't forget, even years later.
Exactly. We've got this amazing analysis of her techniques, and I think it'll be super interesting.
Whether you're a writer or just fascinated by what makes fictional people tick.
Totally. But okay, right off the bat,
What makes those characters stick with us for so long? Why are we still talking about Snape decades later?
what makes Luna Lovegood more than just the weird girl?
Yeah. You see, Rowling takes these, well, almost stereotypical figures.
The brooding professor.
Or the eccentric outsider.
She gives them so much depth, they feel real.
Exactly. Like people you could actually meet.
Snape's redemption arc, that's complex, right?
So complex. And she could have easily left Luna as just quirky, but
There's so much more to her.
she's got her own values, a strong belief in things most people can't see. We see why she's different.
Not just that she's different,
And think about Ginny Weasley or Neville Longbottom. They could have been sidelined.
just the sidekick or the clumsy kid.
But Rowling gives them room to grow, to surprise us.
They're not just there for Harry's story.
They're active participants.
They got their own purpose.
Exactly. But then there's this whole magical world they live in.
Right. How does that affect how much we relate to them?
That's where Rowling's genius comes in. She blends the fantastical.
Magic and all that.
But also those human experiences we all have. Friendships, school stress, first crushes.
All with a sprinkle of magic.
Exactly. It's like even in a world of spells, we're all just figuring life out.
And that's why we connect with them so strongly.
We see ourselves in their struggles, even if our lives aren't quite so magical.
Maybe this is a basic question, but is it also about Rowling just being a great writer?
Oh, absolutely. Her writing is clear, engaging, and she's great at dropping those little hints and clues.
Like with Sirius Black. Finding out about his past totally changed how I saw him,
It made his actions make so much more sense.
even when he wasn't doing the right thing.
That's using backstory effectively.
It deepens our understanding, adds layers to why they do what they do.
Exactly. And, even the good guys in Rowling's world, they aren't perfect.
Yeah, it's true. They make mistakes.
Think about Hermione. Brilliant, but she can be a bit too competitive.
And judgmental.
Yes, she's so smart, but those flaws make her more human.
More relatable. Is that why we root for them even when they mess up?
Absolutely. Flaws create conflict, and conflict is what drives a story.
We see them wrestle with choices, grow. It makes them more interesting.
It's like she's saying, hey, nobody's perfect, not even in a world of magic.
And by showing them working through it, it's like we can too in our own lives.
Speaking of, Rowling's characters change so much throughout the series.
They grow up, right? Like Neville Longbottom. He goes from this timid kid.
To leading the charge against Voldemort.
So how does she make those character arcs feel real, not forced?
It's the balance of the struggles they face, both inside and out.
So it's not just magical battles, it's their inner journeys too.
Self-discovery, just like we all go through, even without wands and smells.
Speaking of defining moments, how about dialogue?
Dialogue, for Rowling, it's more than just words on a page.
It tells us who they are, even beyond what they do.
Like Ron. You hear his humor, his loyalty, just in the way he talks.
And Draco, you can hear the arrogance.
She even went and invented languages for some of her creatures. Gobbledygook, parcel tongue.
Yeah, it's dedication. But does that level of detail actually matter for the characters?
It goes beyond just building the world. It shows how much thought she put into them, their cultures.
Language shapes how we think.
Exactly. It highlights how different they are, how they see the world.
They're not just humans with different looks.
Right. That detail makes a whole world feel more believable.
It's like adding tiny brushstrokes to a painting. You don't notice each one, but
But they create depth.
we haven't even touched on the biggest part of Rowling's characters. That final battle.
Harry and Voldemort. What's amazing is how much that scene relies on everything that came before it.
It's not just about spells. It's about Harry's growth, his choices, the people he loves.
It all leads up to that moment.
And it's so intense, we feel it because we've been on the journey with Harry.
That's the mark of a great storyteller, wouldn't you say?
Totally. We're invested because she made us care about these characters.
It's more than just escaping into a story.
It's connecting with characters who teach us about ourselves.
And that makes me wonder, how do those lessons apply outside of Harry Potter? What can you, the listener, take away from this?
Now that's something to think about as we go into the next part of our deep dive. We'll be exploring how Rowling tackled real-world issues using fantasy and how her characters deal with things that matter to us all.
You know, it's interesting how Rowling takes all these magical elements
Spells, the creatures.
and uses them to talk about real issues, things we deal with every day.
Oh, I never thought about it like that. What kind of issues?
Well, think about how Muggle-borns are treated just because of who their parents are.
They're looked down on.
Exactly. It's
Like racism in our world.
exactly. And it's not just them. Look at werewolves, how everyone's afraid of them.
Like people with illnesses or disabilities who face stigma.
Right. It's amazing how she does that, you know.
Makes you think if she planned it that way.
Hard to say, but the parallels are there. Classism, prejudice, abusing power.
Wow. And she puts it all in this magical world.
It makes you wonder if that's why it resonates with so many people.
Like you see one thing and then, bam, there's a whole other meaning.
They're like one of those optical illusions, and those layers, they make the story so much richer.
You start thinking about these issues even if you don't realize it at first.
It's not just about escaping reality.
It's about using that fantasy world to look at our own.
Our challenges as a society. But how does that connect back to the characters themselves?
Good point. We were talking about them.
It comes down to the choices they make in that world, with all those issues going on.
So it's not just fighting villains.
It's battling the darkness inside themselves, too, and in the world around them.
Like prejudice and all that.
Exactly. Look at Draco Malfoy. He's raised with all these prejudiced beliefs.
And at first he totally buys into them.
But as the story goes on, he has to face what those beliefs really mean. Make hard choices.
It makes him seem more human somehow.
You might not like what he does, but you kind of get where he's coming from.
Like those flaws we were talking about before.
Exactly. Flaws, when they're done well, they make characters feel more real.
We've all got weaknesses.
And seeing them struggle with those, it's powerful.
Like even with magic, your choices matter.
They have real consequences. Speaking of choices, how does she use dialogue for that?
To show what they'll do next.
Dialogue reveals so much, but it can also hint at these bigger themes.
Like what people say to Muggle-borns.
Exactly. It's not just being mean. It shows a deep prejudice in that world.
And it reminds us of that same prejudice in our world. But on a lighter note, remember how we talked about Rowling inventing languages?
Hey, it's amazing.
It's cool for world building, but what does it say about how she creates characters?
It shows how much she cares about making this whole world feel real, down to the tiniest details.
And language changes how we see things.
Exactly. By giving those creatures their own languages, it's like she's giving them their own way of looking at the world.
Like goblins aren't just short humans.
They have their own culture, their own way of understanding things.
Being different doesn't mean you're less.
Powerful message, especially for young readers.
So all those little details, the dialogue, the backstories, even those made-up languages.
They make the characters feel so much more real.
It's like she built this giant puzzle, and every piece fits perfectly.
And it's amazing how she does it all without confusing the reader. But we keep talking about everything else.
We need to talk about Harry and Voldemort.
That final fight. Everything comes together there.
All the little choices, the character development, it all leads to that moment.
It's not just about who's got the stronger magic.
It's about everything they've become.
And the emotion in that scene, you can't deny it.
We're on the edge of our seats because we've been with Harry through everything.
That's how good she is at telling stories.
We care about what happens to these characters even though they're made up.
It shows how powerful well-written characters can be.
They make us think, they make us feel, they stick with us.
It's definitely more than just escapism.
But before we wrap up, I'm curious. What stands out to you about how Rowling creates characters? That's a tough one. There's so much to choose from. But for me, it's how she makes you almost root for even the characters who do bad stuff.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
Like Draco Malfoy.
Right.
We talked about his prejudice, but by the end, you almost feel bad for him.
It really shows how good she is at making characters feel real. She doesn't let him off the hook.
Right. He still made those choices.
But we see what led him there. The pressure from his family, how scared he is. You see him struggle with what he believes.
If he was just a straight-up villain, it wouldn't be the same.
Exactly. It makes you think even people who make awful choices, they're still human.
They can change. Do you think that's part of what she's trying to say with the whole series?
I think so. It's all about choices, right? Choosing what's right, even when it's hard.
Like Neville. He starts out so timid.
And ends up facing Voldemort.
It shows you can choose to be different, to fight for what you believe in.
That's a powerful message, especially for younger readers.
It gives you hope, like you can make a difference.
You can stand up for what's right, even when you're scared.
But it's not all about going it alone.
Oh, definitely not. It's about the people around you, too, the ones who help you.
Like Harry's friends, his teachers, they all support him.
It shows how important it is to have people you can count on.
We need that, especially when things are tough.
It reminds us that we don't have to face everything by ourselves.
The real magic is in those connections, those moments of kindness and love.
That's what makes her stories so special.
It's more than just magic and spells. It's about being human.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into J.K. Rowling's characters...
I want to leave you with something to think about.
Oh, good idea.
Think about the characters who've really stuck with you, from books, movies, anywhere.
The ones who made an impact.
What makes them so memorable? What did you learn from them?
Maybe you can use that, like Rowling, to tell your own stories.
Or just to be a better person. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
It's been a pleasure exploring the magic of Rowling's characters with you.